Mahalo, Chair. You know, this morning, and because we have a extensive agenda, we will forego the normal pattern of going through the actual report itself. If you have any questions that you would like to pose now that we can direct to either myself or members of the staff, I'd be happy to do that. And throughout the day, as we have breaks or during lunch, if you have something specific that you would like to discuss with any of us, you should always feel welcomed, and that goes for the times and breaks between the meetings. So does anybody have any specific questions about the CEO report, other than items like the statewide reservation system will be discussed later? Sales and marketing obviously will complete its segment beyond HVCB, but at this time, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to field them. Vice Chair Arakawa.
Oh, hi. Hi, John, maybe you can share quickly with the board some of the takeaways you got or what you talked to the mayors and the governor about. You recently had a meeting with them. That would be of interest, do you think?
Sure. You know, it'll be included in a one of the upcoming slides, so I'll get to that. But that's a very good question. Thank you. You know, and I also wanted to comment on the code of conduct and the bylaws. You know, take the time to review them and provide and direct any input directly to my office and to Carol. We will start looking at that with fresh eyes, and it is an extension of what it means to malama one another by the way we treat one another, the way we greet one another, and the way we communicate. So we're going to take that very seriously and would invite your input as we go forward. So I want to go back to the opening pule and thank SIG for bringing us to a turning point where the protocol will be as presented today. And the Hawaiians have a term called Huliau, which really references the turning point in transformation. These are not moments in history that are ordinary. These are times when we wake up the next day, we wake up the next year, and life is very different. And so in leading up to the pandemic, 15 months ago, 14 months ago, we were already beginning to experience activities, both in the islands, in the world, politically, fragmentation of our nation. There were activities going on at the volcano, in the heavens, that all seemed to point to the fact that we had entered a different time. And so Huliau is the theme here. And before we go into the situation analysis, Houston, we have a problem. You know, I wanted to go back in the chant that was led by SIG today. He talked about the hearing of a breath, the breathing of the universe. And if you go back, and I use this image because that point, the intersection that physicists refer to as the Big Bang, I just want you to imagine that that was the point in time when the pandemic hit and our lives changed, and everything to the right is the creation of something new. And so roughly 13.8 billion years ago, scientists say there was this major disruption, major flash of light, that from that point on, all new creation came about, including our meeting today. And so Native Hawaiians believe that that point in time before that occurred is the place called Po. I want you to think of these centers as symbolic of the GMTs. These are 8 centers of astronomy around the planet that collectively, through audio telescopes, were able to make an incredible discovery in April of 2019. And that discovery is called the black hole, right? Which was given a Hawaiian name by Professor Larry Kimura of the University of Hawaii, Hilo, Po'ovehi. And so, meaning the embellished dark source of unending creation, okay? April 2019. You know, when I get despondent, down, fatigued, and think that everything centers around my own universe, and then I start thinking about these discoveries and the absolute immense scale that we're dealing with. And so in this case, what we have is a gravitational pull that is so strong that it is actually bending the light of the universe around itself. And one of those phenomenons. But as we go through this and relate to that opening chant that Sig introduced today, I want you to think about it in its grandest context and in its deepest context. So here's a situation that we'll recap. We know we got pent-up demand. About 2 weeks ago, the CDC issued a travel advisory, basically advising Americans to remain away from 80% of the world. We've got increased disposable income because of federal checks. We've got increased air seats that Jay and Daniel just touched on. We've got this perception that Hawaii is a safe place and a healthy place to visit. We've got industry discounts to attract visitors. We have a situation with rent-a-cars. You may have received a letter from me basically encouraging visitors to secure their rent-a-car before they start booking everything else, or at least be educated on other forms of ground transportation that is available to them. And we've got business closures that are slowly beginning to reopen, but not in every case. 3 weeks ago, the board gathered here in executive session, so I'm not going to belabor this point, with Governor Ige. Between the two bills, 862 and 200, we are facing a potential loss of dedicated funding from TAT and the termination of our tourism special fund. It calls for an appropriation from federal government for fiscal 2022. HTA at 60 million, the convention center at 11. We have a reduction of our expenditure ceiling from 141 million to 11 million, applicable to the convention center funds. We've got the loss of the state procurement exemption and authorization to the counties of up to 3% as a TAT surcharge. We've got the relocation of our HTA research department to DBED and the elimination of 7 HTA positions, reducing our authorized positions from 32 to 25. Now, to say that all of us, myself included, are not concerned about this would be a misstatement. But I also want to express my appreciation to the legislature, in particular, Chair Richard Onishi is in the room. All of you will remember that 862 originated as a gut and replace bill out of the Senate. At that time, our appropriation of 79 million and 16.5 to the convention center for a total of 95.5 was reduced to 48.1 million. And the 32 authorized job positions were reduced to 16.25. Okay. And among the line items in that first Senate draft that struck me as being informative is that there was no allocation for governance to underwrite the very convening of this board. And so with less than 24 hours, 202 people submitted and organizations submitted written testimony, of which 201 opposed the bill. And after tweaking the bill was passed. It went back over into conference committee. My gratitude to Chair Onishi and the House is extended because of them taking it from that level to the level we're describing here, okay? Now going forward, what's really important is we all need one another. We may have our differences between staff, between board, and the legislature, but we're gonna need each other going forward. And we need to find a way to make these conditions work. And so while I am concerned, I'm equally as grateful for the conversations that are still ongoing about this. There's no doubt that the larger part of our industry and certain segments of our community are standing in support of HTA. And we need to face the reality that there are segments of our community that in fact would like to see HTA funding dissolved completely or seriously reduced. The perception being that Hawaii does not need any marketing dollars right now. So we will find a way to move forward. The next couple of weeks will be critical to this effort. About, well, I guess it was May 5, I get this letter. It's an invitation from Senator Brian Schatz, and he's requesting my appearance at a Senate congressional hearing, the Committee on Indian Affairs, which he chairs. He chairs as really an extension of the service that U.S. Senator Daniel K. Inouye once provided to that same committee. And so I learned later that 5 of us were invited. It was Bureau of Indian Affairs, Department of Commerce, Vice Chair Lisa Murkowski, Senator Murkowski, invited a representative of the Alaska Tourism Corporation, one of their corporations. And so I found this to be extremely interesting. And then I was asked to submit written oral testimony. And I realized by the invitation that was given, what Senator Schatz was trying to accomplish, which was basically to assert and spotlight Hawaii tourism. The purpose of this hearing was to talk about tourism economies that affect Native peoples. Here's a portion of my testimony in which I assert the fact that in the world of the Native Hawaiian, all life forms and living systems are connected and interrelated. Be it the earth and sky, oceans and forests, flora and fauna, be it our ancestors and descendants, be it the people within our communities and or peoples we host from around the world. We are islanders who can source our genealogical origins to the cosmos and to the molten core of planet Earth. We are Native Hawaiian. When we use the term and or classification of Native Hawaiian, we are referencing a place as much as we are describing a people. During this past year of the pandemic, we were reminded of Hawaii's distinct competitive advantage as a world-class center of learning and a place of discovery and rediscovery. The testimony goes on to itemize the different natural environments that we have on each island and how each one of them is instructive to the way our quality of life can be protected and restored for generations to come. You know, you always take a risk. It was the first time I had appeared at a congressional hearing. I have to admit, his staff was shocked that I was wearing a coat and tie. What they didn't know was I was wearing palaka shorts too. But anyway, it was something that I'll remember, something that we'll continue to focus on. ARPA funds are being directed to this committee for the purpose of helping to generate and regenerate economies that affect Native peoples. In contrast to our 10,400,000 visitors, which was established as a benchmark by the Senator Schatz, Lisa Murkowski's folks testified about 76, a tribe of 76, a community of 76 people, Native Alaskans, whose sole economy is based on cruise ships. And the absence of cruise ships for the last 15 months has just devastated that community and their people. So whether we're talking about it in a very micro scale like that, or in our case on a multi-island scale of 10 million plus visitors as we experienced in 2019, it is something that the federal government is taking very seriously. My hope, Caroline, is that some of this can be translated into some of the work that has been identified with DMAPs. You know, when we talk about Malama, and I have to admit, Malama was embedded in the industry long before I got here, and it's represented in the presentation you just saw. Like most Hawaiian cultural values, I can't really think of one that isn't. This is boundless. This applies to everything. We need to find a way to message the restoration and recovery of our small businesses, of Sherry, your members, right? Because that is not only a responsibility, that is our way to malama them so that they can malama the consumers that they attract. And so malama is not something that we box. It's not a campaign. It's a way of life, right? Just like aloha is. And the reason those two cultural values go together is we will malama the things we love most, whether that's your mother, grandparents, children, community. And as I said, this was embedded long before I got here. It led to a realization for me that part of this recovery was about a very visceral experience I was having that each of you in some way is having. Because beyond our responsibilities to tourism, we have a responsibility to our home. And this has been translated and extended into the work at DMAPs, where the community is encouraged and empowered to care for their own home, whether that home is Molokai, Maui, Lanai, Kauai, all of them. That it needs to be, for this to be effective, it needs to be occurring at a very personal level. Not by something imported out of Honolulu that we think is best for you in Molokai. Which takes me back to January 2020, when this body approved the 4 pillars. To put Hawaii on a trajectory toward responsible tourism. These pillars mean more today than they did when they were adopted. And as we've moved down that road and extended ourselves into communities, we'll start to recalibrate and refine it. And that refinement has resulted in identifying a tourism model that is very responsible, referred to as regenerative tourism. If I took a survey of everyone in this room, a blind survey, and I said, how many of you would like to see the natural resource base of Hawaii be in better condition 3 generations from now than it is today? Blind survey, I have no doubt in my mind, 100% of you would agree with that. If I said 3 generations from now, would you like to see the Hawaiian language used more broadly in our society? Would you like to see the cultural practices and traditions and festivals flourishing that emanate from our Hawaiian culture 3 generations from now? I have no doubt in my mind, all of you would say yes. And if I said the fabric held together by the fibers of the spirit of aloha and malama that hold our community together and make our communities unique, do you want to see that fabric in better condition 3 generations from now than it is today? The vote would be unanimous. And when we think of branding, each one of those 3 pillars is the foundation upon which we project the commercial brand of Hawaii as a world destination. So if we can see that 3 generations from now, and we see that in common, what do we have to do today to get on that trajectory, to make sure that happens? And I would put forth that we need to accelerate and do the things that we're doing. We need, such as DMAPs, such as operationalizing the strategic plan, such as messaging to the world that when you come to the islands, our islands, you need to be respectful, you need to be mindful. We're not going to get there overnight. This summer is going to produce all kinds of action. And people who maybe lack the etiquette of respect and being mindful that you're in somebody else's place. And we're going to have to learn how to deal with that and de-escalate those situations around simple things like wearing a mask when you're supposed to and taking care of the people that are in your immediate vicinity. So regenerative tourism is a refinement. And that refinement is echoed by the associations that HTA has made that is reflected in the strategic plan itself. A year ago, June 2020, this board unanimously agreed to become signatories of the Aina Aloha Economic Futures Declaration. A visit to their website, if you haven't done so recently, you will find an expanded narrative on regenerative tourism. The Aloha Plus Challenge, the initiative of the Hawaii Green Growth, is also embedded in our strategic plan. 6 goals in sustainability to be achieved by the year 2030 in areas like renewable energy, waste management, right? In the months ahead, it's going to be incumbent on us to start getting our industry leaders, hotels. Ben, we're going to need your help. The big global brands who, in order to comply with the global brand, you have goals in sustainability that they have to achieve. We have to redirect that data and information in ways that protect their confidentialities and yet demonstrate to this community that the largest industry is leading Hawaii toward a sustainable future. In Hawaii Green Growth recently, well, maybe it's over a year now, has been dubbed local 2030 hub of the United Nations. First in the Asia Pacific region, first set of islands in the world to receive that designation. And we do it for the generations that lay ahead of us. And so we're at the turning point, and I couldn't be more excited about that. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll return it to you, and if there are any questions or comments, I'll be happy. Thank you.
Mahalo, John. Awesome. Why don't we take a 7-minute break right now, and then we'll come back with item number 7. Let's aim back at 11:10. Good. How you been?